Okay, so this next section is it says factoring polynomials with 4 terms. Any single time you have 4 terms in your polynomial and you need a factor, it's called factoring by grouping because you're going to group together things to be able to factor. I want this one. So first, you have to group the first 2 terms together. You group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. So on this one would be like having x cubed plus 7x squared plus 2x plus 14. So you put these two, you look at these two, and you look at these two. That's just what it means by group the first 2 and the last 2. There it is. All right. Then you got to factor out the greatest common factor from each binomial because you just had a polynomial and you turned it into two binomials by grouping. So you'd look at the first group and say, okay, your leading coefficient here is a 1. 1 does go into 7, but then look at your terms. Look at your variables. You have an x cubed and an x squared. So you take the smaller one. So you take an x squared, and that would leave you with x plus 7. And then on the right side, you have a term, you have 2 and you have 14, and 2 does go into 14. So you can factor out a 2. But this one doesn't have a variable, so that's all you can factor out. And so then 2x, take out a 2, leaves you with x. 14 divided by 2 gives you 7. Then you got to factor the common binomial out. And all this means is when you do this part right here, what you have in parentheses should match on both sides. So we have an x plus 7 and an x plus 7. So it's out of the parentheses x squared plus 2 goes in 1. And in the other one, we have that x plus 7. And again, just like with anything related to factoring, if you're unsure if you factored that out correctly, you can always distribute to check your answer. So this is where you would end to be your answer because this is the factored form of this polynomial. But if you want to know that sure, like that's for sure thing, you can always factor this out. You can always simplify this one using your box method, using your FOIL method. But either way, I'm going to tell you, you're going to come back to what you started with. So once you factor, you can always distribute. And what you get when you distribute should always be what you started with. I think I saw some people doing something about factoring on their last homework. I don't know. I'm going to be grading that factoring review today, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Today's grading papers day. That's right. I had to think about it for a second. All right. Now to move the other laptop. Okay. I didn't pull the red out, so we'll use orange. All right, so your first example on this is x cubed plus 4x squared plus 8x plus 32. We are a four term. There's four terms in here. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're all in order 3, 2, 1, 0. All right. Now, when you do the first part, group the first two terms and the last two terms. You can also just draw a line between in the very center. So you should have two terms on the left and two terms on the right. Okay, and then looking at the left two terms, since this is 1, you're not going to be able to take a number out of here unless you want to take out a 1, but 1 goes into everything. And then on all of these, yeah, for the most part, on this one, you always take the smaller of the two. So they both have x, but x squared is smaller than x cubed, so you factor that out. And remember, when you factor out a greatest common factor, you take that first term, divide it by the greatest common factor, which would just be x. And then you take that second term and divide it by the greatest common factor, which those cancel, which would give you 4. So then on the inside, you would have x plus 4. And then looking at the right side, 8 is smaller than 32. So you ask yourself, does 8 go into 32? In this case, it's yes. So your greatest common factor is an 8. Again, you take that 8x, divide it by your greatest common factor. This would leave you with just x. And then 32 divided by 8 should just leave you with 4. And then your insides, what you have in parentheses on both of them should match each other. So in one set of parentheses, you should have what you factored out, x squared plus 8, because you take this sign in front of it. And then the other parentheses is what's inside, x plus 4. And then that one's your answer. Okay. Next one. What's the next one? All right, I'm gonna jump down to number 5 because 2, 3, and 4 are basically just like this one, where they don't have a leading coefficient. This one doesn't either, but this one started off with p to the 5 minus 6p cubed minus 2p squared plus 12. And this one went 3, 2, 1, 0. This one kind of skips. This one goes 5, 3, 2, 0, but it's still in standard form from exponents going from greatest to smallest. All right, splitting this one down again in the middle. On the left side, since this one's a 1, you can factor out a 1. But then you have a p in both terms, and then you have p cubed as a smaller one, so you need to factor out a p cubed. And then p to the 5th divided by p cubed is p squared. Because remember, that's p to the 5 minus 3, which is just 2. And then 6p cubed divided by p cubed, the p cubes canceled and leave you with just 6. So the first term left us with p squared. And then this one had addition, but this one actually has subtraction in the middle, so you need to bring down that subtraction sign. And the second term just left us with 6. Okay, on the right side, because the negative is right in front of that 2, you're actually going to factor out a negative 2 from both sides. 2 does go into 12. So the negative 2p squared divided by negative 2, the negative 2 cancel, and you just get left with p squared. And then 12 divided by negative 2 gives you negative 6. If you hadn't have factored out that negative sign, then you would have had negative p squared plus 6, and it's not, doesn't match. Because again, these two terms that get left, these two have to match each other. So then we factored out p cubed minus 2, and that left us with p squared minus 6 on both. And you can always distribute using your FOIL method or your box method. Either of the two will work, and you'll get back to where we started. There we go. One with a term. Oh, yeah. Let's see. This one's number 7. It's 3x cubed minus 21x squared plus 4x minus 28. All right. It's in 3, 2, 1, 0 form, so we're good. Then split it down the middle. And you always want to split it right after the second term, but before the sign of the third term. This one actually does have a leading coefficient of 3. Remember, your leading coefficient is your very first coefficient of your whole polynomial. 3 does go into 21. It goes in there 7 times. 3. You have an x cubed, you have an x squared. X squared is smaller than x cubed, so you're going to factor out the x squared. Okay, 3x cubed divided by 3x squared. Three cancels out with 3. That just leaves you with an x. Bring down your subtraction sign. And then 21x squared divided by 3x squared. Your x squareds cancel. 21 divided by 3 is 7. So you got left with 7. Then you move on to the right side. We have a plus 4x, so we're going to put a plus down. 4 does go into 28. So we're going to factor out a 4. We have an x to the 1 here. We have an x to the 0 here. So you're not going to be factoring out any variables. Then 4x divided by 4 is just x because the 4's cancel. And then 28 divided by 4 is 7. Bring down that subtraction sign, and that left us with 7. And then note we have x minus 7, x minus 7 in the middle. They're the exact same. So then we had factored out of 3x squared plus 4, and that left us with x minus 7 inside parentheses. And that's good. All right. I'm hoping everybody's getting it. Then again, it's Monday. Mondays are always weird. So y'all are all muted. You can just drop a comment in the little chat if you have a question. It'll let you know. And then I'm sure y'all know that you can send them to everyone or you can send them to just somebody. So you can just send them to me if you don't want everybody else to read your question. All right. Let's do 9. Okay, 8 is kind of, it's set up similar, except it uses y to the 4th minus 6y cubed minus 7y plus 21. But the thing with those is our greatest common factor was always our leading coefficient. This one's going to be a little bit different. 16a cubed plus 8a squared minus 6a minus 3. Again, we're going to split that right after our second term and right before our sign for the third term. Okay. Notice on this one, it's not actually the smaller number is on the second term with 8. And 8 does go into 16. So we're going to be factoring out an 8. And then we have a cubed and a squared. And we're going to factor out a squared. That's going to leave us with 16a cubed divided by 8a squared. 16 divided by 8 gives you 2. A cubed divided by a squared gives you a. Oh, I better go fix that. All right, give me 1 second. Right. So, that's right. We factored it out of our first term, so that left us with 2a. Then 8a squared very territorial mama cats. 8a squared divided by 8a squared, it just gives you 1. So this would just give you, bring down the plus, and that would leave 1. If you're going to factor out one of these terms, it's always going to leave you with a 1. Looking at the right side, we have a negative at the front again, so we're actually going to factor out a negative from both sides. And then 3, again, notice that instead of the third term being smaller than this last term, we have that this term is smaller than this term. 3 does go into 6. So the negative 6a divided by negative 3 is going to give you 2a. The negatives cancel each other out. Remember, guys, if you have a negative divided by a negative, that's a positive, not another negative. And then negative 3 divided by negative 3, again, that's the same thing. Anything divided by itself is 1. So that left you with 2a plus 1. And then notice again, we have 2a plus 1 on both, inside both of our sets of parentheses. So then we had factored out an 8a squared minus 3. And we have 2a plus 1. Ignore the cats. Okay, let's do 11. Remember, I try to do like one example out of all of these, so there's a whole lot more examples on this thing that I will post along with this, but normally as long as you just have, I like to do just one from each. I'm gonna go ahead and split that. Again, we are still in we are in standard form. We're in alphabetical order. All our x's come first, and then our y's come second. And with our exponents going from 2, 1, 1, this xy came after this x because of the fact that it has a y attached to it. And then this y has to go at the very end because y comes after x in the alphabet. All right. 8 does not go into 12, but the next factor of 8 would be 4. 4 goes into 8, 4 goes into 12, so we're going to be factoring out a 4 from there. We have x squared and we have x, so you're going to factor out the smaller of those two, which is just x. And then 8x squared divided by 4x. 8 divided by 4 gives you 2. X squared divided by x gives you x. And then 12x divided by 4x. 12 divided by 4 gives you 3. X over x cancels. So then the first term, after taking out the greatest common factor, left you with 2x. You have addition. The second term, after taking out the greatest common factor, left you with 3. Close your parentheses. You have a plus right here, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that down because everything was addition here, so everything's going to be addition when you factor. 2 does not go into 3, but 1 does go into 2 and 1 does go into 3. And then look at the variables. We have an x, y, and we have a y. The only variable they both have in common is that y. So we're going to factor out a 1y. 2xy divided by y. The y's cancel. That's going to leave you 2x. And then 3y divided by y. Again, the y's cancel, and that's just going to leave you with 3. And this left you with 2x plus 3 on the inside. Make sure you have 2x plus 3, 2x plus 3. And then we had factored out 4x, and we factored out a positive y. And inside our parentheses was 2x plus 3. So remember, one of your terms is always what's inside of the parentheses, and the other one is going to be what you factored out. I've been on TikTok too long, so I have some of those songs stuck in my head now. Okay, 14, and then the bottom half, and that's it. 14 says 4r squared s minus 8rs minus 3r plus 6. I'm going to draw my line down the middle, dividing into my left and to my right. All right, the greatest common factor on the left, 4 is smaller than 8. 4 does go into 8. So we're going to factor out a 4. I don't know why I started my parentheses when that's not the only thing we're going to factor out. All right, next term would be r squared and r. R is smaller than r squared, so we're going to factor out an r. And then they both have an s to the 1, so that's what we're going to factor out. 4rs on the left side. 4r squared s divided by 4rs. The 4's cancel, the s's cancel, and that just leaves you with r. And then 8rs divided by 4rs. The rs cancel, the rs cancel, and then 8 divided by 4 is just 2. So what did that leave us? R, we had a subtraction sign, so bring that down, and then 2. On the right side, we have that negative in the front again, so we're going to factor out a negative. 3 does go into 6. And then we just have an r to the 1 and no r over here, so that'll be it. Negative 3r divided by negative 3 will just leave you with r. And then 6 divided by negative 3 will leave you with negative 2. And then make sure they both have the same thing on the inside. In this case, it's r minus 2, r minus 2. All right, so we factored out 4rs on the first side, and we factored out a negative 3 on the right. And then we had r minus 2 on the inside. I don't know where there's trouble making document. All right, and then the bottom half is just rearranging terms. So if you kind of notice on some of these, I would kind of point out that they were in standard form. The reason I did that is because you're going to have some problems where they are not in standard form, and so then you're going to have to put them in standard form. So number 15 has 2xy plus 5x minus x squared minus 10y. And looking at this is not in standard form. Remember, it goes alphabetical order, so all your x's need to come before your y's, and that is true. Everything with an x does come before everything with a y. But then your exponents need to be in descending order. So this negative x squared should not be all the way back here, since it's the highest power, because all these other ones have ones, but this one has a 2. You're going to bring this one to the front. And then the next one would be just 5x. Because you got to look at all your x's, everything with an x before it. And then we would put 2y. And remember, if there's not 2xy, since there's no sign in front of it, it's going to be a positive so long as there's not a negative sign. And then at the end, we'll have negative 10y. These two terms, the way I like to think of them is you need to group your y's with your y's and your x's with your x's. So since this term had a y in it, I put it in the third spot. So it would be when you threw down your center line in the middle, it would be yy, xx. So everything with just x first, and then anything with xy. Oh, I'm gonna have to do 18. Okay. All right. We have a negative in the front. So I'm gonna go ahead and factor out that negative. We have an x squared and an x. I'm gonna factor out the x because that's smaller. Negative x squared divided by negative x would just give you a positive x. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. 5x divided by negative x, well, that's going to give you a negative because you had a positive and a negative gives you a negative. The x's cancel, which just leaves you with a 5. On the right side, we have a plus, so we're going to put a plus. 2 goes into 10, so we're going to put a 2. And then they both have a y in common, so we're going to factor out a y. 2xy divided by 2y, well, that's going to cancel the 2's, that's going to cancel the y's, it's going to leave you with an x. Negative 10 divided by a 2 will give you a negative 5, and the y's cancel. And if you notice, our inside terms are the same, or our two parentheses are the same. So we factored out a negative x on the left, and we have factored out a positive 2y on the right, and we got left with x minus 5. Mm-hmm. And then I just want to rearrange 18. It's 10ab plus 21 minus 15a minus 14b. I'm not actually going to factor this one, I'm just rearranging it. They all have a power of 1, but go with the a's. All a's got to come first. So this one right here, I'm going to put this one first. Negative 15a. And then I'm going to put 10b next. Or 10ab, because this is just a b term. This has no term. Anything with no term in it is automatically at the very end. This is my next a term. Anything with an a. Then we're done with all our a, so we move on to the b. And then we put plus 21 at the end. And then you'd split it down the middle. And go from there. And I'm not going to factor the rest of that one out. I'm just going to leave it right there. Go, go, go.